Hey, welcome to the November edition of the How to Podcast series. What are we doing this month? We're doing an episode every single day for the month of November. Yeah, that's a lot of podcast episodes, Dave. And what I want to do is I want to shine a light on amazing podcasters who are doing great things in podcasting. I want you to meet some of my friends. Now, these are friends that I've met through this podcast. These are friends that I've met by being on their show. These are friends that have been at our meetups. These are friends who I cherish and I think are people that you need to know. The best way to grow podcasting is word of mouth marketing, telling people about people's shows. That's what this is all about for the month of November. It's all word of mouth. You're going to hear from them come on and talk about their podcast. You're going to hear clips from shows. You'll have links to go follow these amazing people. And I want to give you a variety of different amazing podcasters for you to fall in love with. And you found the right spot. This is November. It's all about the listeners. It's all about you. And I want to shine a light on some amazing people. Are you ready? Okay. Let's jump into this because I think you're going to love this. And I'm glad you're here. And what I can't wait for is the day when you and I get to interact. I can't wait for us to meet each other at our meetups, online, through the link in the notes attached to this episode, where you and I can meet each other and I can be there in your corner to support you. I would love to do that. So here's another example of one of my friends at their show, and I want you to fall in love with them just as much as I have. Okay? Welcome to the How to Podcast series. It's November. It's National Podcast Post Month. It's 30 episodes in 30 days, and I want you to meet some of my favorite people in this world called podcasting. It's all about them. It's not about me. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Check out one of my friends. You ready? You ready? Okay, here we go. So I had the opportunity of being on the Profit Your Knowledge podcast with James Allen and had a great conversation with James. And he's a great podcaster, brings a lot of great people on his show. He had a wide variety of guests on his podcast. And James is a great host as well. He really kind of takes his guests through a conversation to benefit you as a listener. And James is just a good, curious person. And he's here to help you profit your knowledge. Take what you know and turn it into income, whether that's a side income or your main gig. And we talked podcasting, and it was fun. It was fun to be on there. I'll just take a snippet of our time together on his show and play it for you here. But links for James' podcast in the show notes. Go take a listen. If you're looking at turning whatever you know into money, James has got a great podcast for you. Go check out James Allen's podcast, Profit Your Knowledge. Here's a little clip from my guest appearance on James's show, and I'll have links for his podcast in the show notes. But if you're interested, go check it out. Hear Dave on his best behavior on someone else's podcast. It's the Profit Your Knowledge podcast with James Allen. Here we go. Here's a little clip for you, featuring yours truly as a guest. Wow, that's interesting. So here we go.
And now, on with the show.
Welcome back to the Profit Your Knowledge podcast. Today's guest is David Campbell. Get this, David has 8 different active podcasts going on right now, which is insane, but he still manages it. He has a great story about his relationship with his wife and how she was like, hold on, you're cut off at 8. So he'll get into the story, but he has a love for music production and created this passion for podcasting. And now he helps other people start and grow their own podcast, but also he makes money through different revenue streams, even without sponsorships, which is like the total opposite of what we're always told when it comes to podcasting. It's like you have to build this big audience and then get sponsors to pay you. But David has found ways to monetize his podcast in many different ways, rather than just going towards the traditional route. So I'm really excited to unpack this and get to know you. How you doing today, David?
It's great to be on the Profit Your Knowledge podcast. I'm a listener, so I feel really odd that you're in my ears all the time, and now I get to be with you on camera. This is awesome. I love this.
All the time? How long have you been listening to the podcast?
Oh, it's been like months now. I'm like, we got the idea that we can meet together. I'm like, this is a great win for me.
That's awesome. Wow, that's so cool. Someone told me one time, they were on the podcast and they're like, yeah, like I listen to your podcasts every day. And they're like, your podcast is up there. It's one of my top 3 next to Alex Hormozzi's The Game and then another one. I was like, what? That's crazy. So I was super excited. And then he's on the show. I'm like, now you're going to be on the show. How cool is that? So what an honor. David, I want to hear a bit about your story. What made you decide to go this entrepreneurial route? And then how did you stumble into ultimately having like 8 different podcasts? I think everyone's kind of wondering about that.
So I've loved creating things from nothing all the way back into high school. Created a little music store that I ran out of my bedroom. Back in the day, we sold a thing called CDs. I don't know. People don't even know what those are. But I was in a small town. There was no music stores. So I'm like, well, I'll just make one. So I created my own music store. I would set up at little events and set up a table and sell CDs. Hey, it was great. So I just, whenever I see something that there's a hole, and I'm like, how can we fix that? So that's kind of who I am. That's kind of how I'm hardwired. And podcasting for me was just the idea that I could create something with my voice and reach an audience. It is like the coolest thing ever. And I'm on a mission to help people find their voice and get out there and try podcasting, because I think you're going to love it. And I'm kind of preaching to the choir here with your show, but for those that are listening and you're thinking, I don't know if I can do this, I think you can. And I'd love to be part of that solution to help you do that.
Yeah. I helped a woman start her own podcast, and she had so many doubts and insecurities and like what ifs and just making it way more complicated than it needed to be. And I took her through the process that I did when I made a podcast and showed her some equipment, gave her some recommendations. And she was like, this was so easy to set this whole thing up. And now she's on every major podcasting platform for free. It doesn't have to be complicated. So in terms of that, I think we should just squish this bug right now. How can somebody get started podcasting? And what kind of equipment would you recommend for someone who's getting into the game of podcasting?
So I would say start with what you have. Really, when you're brand new at this and you're not sure if you're going to pursue this and you're just kind of pod curious at the beginning, I would say start with what you have, because you're familiar with it. If all you have is a phone, okay, it's probably not the best option, but it's an option. It's what you have. So start with that. I would go from a walk with my dog and I would record my voice as I walk along and just talk about something and then listen back to it. What does it sound like? Are you making sense? And then just listen to it, do it over and over again before you even come to the idea of I'm going to actually make a podcast. Practice. Mm-hmm. You don't just go to a baseball game as a fan and then just say, you know what, I could do this. Jump over the wall, grab a bat and hit a home run. Nobody does that. Those people actually work hard to get onto the field. So as a casual listener of podcasts, there's a lot of work involved behind the scenes to get to the point where you feel confident to be on microphone and get your voice out there. So don't be afraid of a little bit of hard work and some practice.
Yeah, just repetition. That's just like anything else. And I think people just get nervous. They're like, oh my gosh, people are going to be listening to my podcast. And it took me a long time to develop any sort of listener base in the beginning. So even when you start a podcast, no one's really listening, but people will, as you stay with it long enough, you'll get more attention. And then people do like to go back to your old episodes and kind of binge in the beginning. And it's cool to see that too.
So there it is, a little snippet, just a tiny little piece of myself being on James's podcast. And again, I'd love for you to go check out his great show, Profit Your Knowledge Podcast by James Allen. And I was so honored, James, to be on your show. Thank you for that. We'd love for everyone to go check it out. Go like, follow, share, do all those things. And tell somebody about James's podcast. Let's get more listeners for James. He's a great podcast host, great at asking questions, a great interviewer, and a super kind person as well. So, Profit Your Knowledge by James Allen. Links in the show notes. Again, another one of the episodes featuring great podcasters, podcast friends of mine. And again, love being a guest on a show. If you're looking for a guest for your show and you could put up with me for 30, 45 minutes, I would love to come on your show and be a guest and talk podcasting, talk dad stuff. I could talk music. I could talk about being married for 30 plus years, empty nest dad, all kinds of great stuff I could come on and talk about. And I'd love to be part of your podcast if you're looking for a guest. Even if you have one episode or you don't even have any episodes, reach out to me. I'd love to come on your show. And again, James, thank you so much for having me on Profit Your Knowledge. Links in the show notes, everybody. Go check it out. Thanks for listening. So I love being a podcaster. I love meeting these great people. And I love the fact that you pressed play on this episode and that you're still here. That tells me that there's something here for you. And if you're like, Dave, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this community and I want to spend some time with you. There's a link in the show notes. It's just for you. You and I can get together and chat about your podcast, answer any questions you have. And the most important thing is we get to meet each other. So if you feel like you've been podcasting alone, you should never podcast alone. You should podcast in a group. We have a community just for you. And I, Dave, would love to be part of your community. HowToPodcast.ca is where you can find me, find our amazing community, and meet the people you've met here today on this episode. So, what are you waiting for? Stop podcasting by yourself. Reach out. I would love to talk to you. Happy National Podcast Post Month. And we'll talk soon. Thank you for being part of a community, and thank you for listening to this episode. HowToPodcast.ca. Take care.